The LEGO Star Wars games were a staple of my childhood and for many of my generation. The Complete Saga merging the two original titles with extra content was amazing. From the memorable sounds of R2-D2 and Yoda's screams, to the mumbling of the LEGO characters in the cutscenes, the LEGO games have a place in everyone's hearts. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga brings back everything that you loved from the Complete Saga game and gives it a huge upgrade with new enhanced visuals and mechanics and the addition of the content from the new Disney trilogy of movies. Let's take a look at the latest Star Wars LEGO game. What's changed and what can you expect from it, and is it worth buying right now? The main menu sequence introduces the game in an epic fashion. It basically has a lineup of all the main characters from each of the 9 different movies in a movie poster-esque shot, which is a really awesome opening when you first run the game. This can be a little bit repetitive every time you back out to the main menu, but it's really cinematic and cool. As for the gameplay options, there's a lot of useful options in here. Fall recovery is definitely one of note, which I noticed. This one can be enabled and it respawns your character unharmed after you drop into hazardous areas. So if you drop into like a huge endless pit and you die, you won't end up losing all your studs and potential progress towards the true Jedi challenge in the current level. This is actually also really nice because it doesn't disable any of the achievements, even though it seems like it would be a cheat. The aim assist settings in the Skywalker Saga game are also really cool. You have a range of different options in here. You have the target lock on, which allows you to quick trigger lock onto targets with the controller. Target slowdown, which gives you enhanced accuracy when aiming with the controller. So when you aim in with a gun, it will slow your crosshair and the speed of its movement when you're close by to an enemy to make you a little bit more precise when aiming. There's also homing bullets, which kind of just target and move towards the enemies even if you're not completely aiming on them. This just basically makes controller aiming feel far more fluid, and so you can just focus on the fun. Controller configs can be changed and set from the menu pretty seamlessly in this game, with multiple options and really great controller support natively. Remember, the LEGO games were all kind of designed to be played on controller, so this is something which I'd expect and I'm really grateful for. I do like the Steam integration for controller support in games, but it just doesn't really work as well as it does natively when the game actually supports it. For the video settings, there's some pretty cool options here. The game will run really well at around 1080p at 60 FPS. This is because you have VSync and everything just runs really seamlessly. The level selection screen basically works in a really unique way. It shows each movie of the 3 different trilogies. So for an example, from episode 1 all the way to episode 9, the levels of the first movie of each specific trilogy is pre-unlocked and playable. So for an example, you have The Phantom Menace, A New Hope, and Force Awakens, which are all playable from the start. But you have to complete each of one of these beginning movies from each trilogy to then unlock the next in the chosen trilogy which you wish to play and advance through. So this means, for an example, if you want to play Phantom Menace, you have to play through this before you can unlock Attack of the Clones. This is really nice because it lets you dive into basically any period of the Star Wars era in the timeline and just play from the set of movies which you actually prefer the most. For an example, I like the prequel movies the most, so starting from The Phantom Menace would be pretty cool. For this particular review though, I decided to play A New Hope because it's classic and it kind of appeases the majority of the fan base of Star Wars. Of course, when beginning the game, you have the classical Star Wars credit roll from the previous games, which has a synopsis of the movie. This is obviously to replicate the feel of the movies and introduce the plot. The cinematics are really well done and action-packed, and they really build on the anticipation of the upcoming missions. This is especially clear when you're first launching the game and jumping into the first mission. It makes you feel really excited of what's to come. As per the newer LEGO games, the Skywalker Saga does feature real voice acting lines, so unlike the old LEGO games that had those comical slurs and mumbling of the characters, it is a little bit different here. But you can actually use a special cheat code or option setting that enables the whole mumbling thing from the old games, so if you want to play it like the old games and have the characters mumbling and not speaking like normal humans do, well, you can actually do that so it feels more in line of the old classic games, which is a really cool option which they decide to add.
Hope. We're over Tatooine. This will be safer with an old friend.
Now, one thing to note here is the movement in this game is different. It's more fluid, there's more animations, and the keybinds and controls are a little bit different to the older LEGO games. Of course, I'm making this comparison to the original trilogy, the Complete Saga, and the first LEGO Star Wars game. Perhaps this is not different to some of the newer titles like LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens, but I didn't play this game. I'm of course making the comparison to the older LEGO Star Wars titles in the same series. There's also a new shooting system. This will let you aim in with a weapon and hit enemies with a new target crosshair. This is obviously far different to the older games, but this makes for some more action-packed gameplay. It still does actually feel like a classic LEGO game because of all the other elements encompassing the whole LEGO experience, but it now has elements of a third-person shooter and mechanics of one, so it kind of feels like a LEGO game but just upgraded and has better combat. Of course, in this situation, the aim assist is really nice because sometimes it also lets you snap easily to a target in focus, like some kind of bullseye or something that you need to shoot to progress the game stage of the level. This is really cool if you happen to miss what you're supposed to do, and then you can trigger the next stage of the mission. The shooting system also has a type of cover system. You'll notice this on the first level of A New Hope, for an example. When stormtroopers come through the blast door and you're behind cover as Princess Leia, it lets you fire from the hip or shoot aimed in. Obviously, shooting from the hip is not very accurate, so it's realistic in that sense, but it's really cool to have elements of actual shooter games in a LEGO game. It definitely makes it like more of an action exploration game. It's also super fun that you can shoot off the helmets of stormtroopers. This reveals their heads and faces below the helmets. This is a pretty comical feature that reminds me of Chewbacca being able to pop off their arms in the old games. There's even an achievement which is granted for shooting off enemies' helmets. Also, with the cover system, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can sometimes build different barriers and objects to actually use as cover, and the computer controlled enemies like the stormtroopers can sometimes also build them up themselves and get behind them as cover. It's really cool when an AI character behaves just like a player does, and this is definitely present in this side of the game. If you're a seasoned LEGO game player, you'll probably find yourself in the same habit of smashing and shooting everything for studs, just like I did. That's because True Jedi is still something that you can earn by collecting a ton of studs, but in this game it's broken into 3 different segments, and each of these progression segments of the True Jedi grants you a Kyber brick. This basically lets you earn 3 for each tier of the True Jedi experience. So when you get enough studs to unlock the full 3 tiers, you'll be granted 3 Kyber bricks for completing the mission. This is of course not the only way that you can actually earn these, and they'll be quite important later. There's still the same mechanics and puzzles as expected from the old games, like using your gun to grapple onto objects and pulling them down, but they feel a lot more polished here as you need to press a certain button within a circle to perform the action successfully, for an example. But I'll touch on a little bit more in depth on these later. The melee attack system is also different in this game too. There's a super cool new combo system where you can perform a chain of different melee attacks using a series of 3 buttons, which then lets you eliminate enemies in really super cool ways. This is also necessary for when they block your attacks, which is also a new feature too. This is why you use a combo to parry them. There's a neat little tutorial at the beginning of the game for this, which is nice. It basically lets you test it in slow motion, so you can actually understand this whole mechanic because it's new to this game. The objectives and mission hints are also really nice in the new LEGO Star Wars game too. It makes the game pretty dummy proof. The left hand side of the HUD will display the current mission's objective and what you need to do, and there's also icons around the map with arrows pointing to them and particle effects in a trail that will make it really obvious where you need to go next. This makes it pretty hard to get lost, so you can just focus on fun. It's features like this that just makes it super family friendly and enables anyone to play it without getting confused. The facial expressions on the characters also change slightly depending on their actions. For an example, when characters are idle, they might stand still and smile or look like they're wondering about something, but when they run, they might get angry or look tough and ready for battle. I noticed this with Leia in particular. It's little subtle features like this that make the game look a bit more believable, and you've got to appreciate the fine details that the developers actually put into the work on this game, and probably why it took a lot longer to actually release it. One thing I particularly liked is the character switching in the game. They took a page out of the book of GTA 5 in the sense that even if you're in single player and not playing with a friend, you sometimes still need to switch to the other character to perform a certain action to let one of them get past an area, which feels a lot more fluid in this game. Of course, you've always had to do this, but the way that you switch characters, it feels just like GTA 5 does, especially when the other computer controlled character is a little bit further back in the map than you are. Now, as you'd expect, there are a few Easter eggs which are hidden throughout. One example is a hint to the old LEGO Star Wars games. games. On the first New Hope level, there's a box of bricks with the cover art of LEGO Star Wars The Original Trilogy with box art printed on them. This is a subtle ode to the classic games. I'm sure there's a Complete Saga box or original LEGO Star Wars game on other levels hidden somewhere too. Hidden areas are also just as fun to uncover. I stumbled into one where I had to cross electric barriers just like a spy movie during some kind of bank heist. After crossing it, I discovered a campsite with a tent, a teddy, and some random bricks and blocks. I don't know who on earth is camping in the attic of the Tantive 4 ship, but each to their own, I guess. I also particularly like the door panels in this game. For an example, panels to open normal doors now have directional arrows that you have to press in turn 4 different times when they come into the focus circle. This reminds me of how you play dancing games like Dance Dance Revolution or the old minigames from GTA San Andreas. One thing I love about the new building in this LEGO Star Wars game is the builds that can be rebuilt into something else. An example is one of the builds that first builds into a turret to break down a door and clear the following room, but which is then rebuilt into a water sprayer to hose down the flames on the second room's entrance. Gonk droids are also just as charming as they were in the older games, although they're now mostly brown coloured rather than grey, but hey, you can actually hop on them and ride about on a gonk now too if you feel like it, which is actually kind of funny. It's things like this that remind me that you're playing a kids game that just doesn't take itself too seriously. Stormtroopers also have a few goofs and gaffs too, which you'll see in small cinematics and cutscenes. This humanizes them a little bit, but it also shows you how generally stupid numbskulls that they are in the LEGO games, and how literally every game and fan material depicts Stormtroopers as just really stupid and dumb. They do kind of feel like the whole Disney-fied Stormtroopers though in the later movies, just like in the new sequel movies, because they have numbers assigned to them as units, but it's still pretty funny to watch them interact with each other.
You remember the password for this thing, 318? 318? I'm 764. You're kidding. Where's 318? I thought you were 318.
I particularly like the puzzle where you drag a hologram block of Admiral Akbar onto the 3 different panels to open a blast door. It's a trap. Droids will still work the same as they used to, and they'll still be required for most of the access panels and for opening doors in the game. Although R2 is a little more fierce this time round, as he can basically belly bounce and flop around to bully C-3PO, with his zap ability being particularly deadly too. One thing I like is how 3PO can break down into multiple parts, and he takes a super long time to die. You then basically have to piece him back together and find his legs before you can actually use him. When you do though, you can use access panels to perform a range of different abilities, the first being triggering the alarm in the level, followed by a super satisfying hijack of a nearby turret to spray down the innocent stormtroopers that are leaving the room in a hurry.
Fire alarm! Everyone, run! In a disorderly fashion!
Droids are not really generally seen as a threat by enemies in this game, so the funny thing is you can literally run up to stormtroopers and bully them and beat them up a good deal before they even bother reacting to you. It was pretty hilarious to throw stormtroopers over the shoulder and combo them down as C-3PO. He's actually pretty gangster in this game and the least person you'd expect to actually do any kind of damage to an enemy in Star Wars. The end of the mission was pretty funny too. It's basically littered with stormtroopers sleeping on the job and a few nods to old game Easter eggs. The first being a stormtrooper with headphones just innocently jamming to music in the first room, and the second revealing 3 other beach dude stormtroopers just chilling in a jacuzzi with drinks. This is the kind of thing that just makes LEGO Star Wars games hilarious and so satisfying to play, and I'm sure this will spawn a ton of memes a little bit later over on Reddit. R2's control panel hacking is also a lot more interactive now too. Instead of just plugging his dongle into the wall and performing magic like in the old games, you actually need to rotate the different arcs of the interface to match in order to actually unlock the doors. So instead of just tapping a button, all of the control panels and character interactions are a lot more interactive and generally more satisfying and fun. The end of the mission shows you progress. This is the point where it shows your true Jedi progress and Kyber brick unlocks, the challenges of the previous level which you completed and which are missing, your collected mini-kit progress, and the new characters which you unlocked. To conclude, from my first impressions, I think LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a great game which pays homage to the previous games in the series. It features classical Easter eggs and some new, and it reimagines many of the older levels of the game, but with a whole new polish, with its new combat system, a brand new host of features, improved animations, and general visual appeal. It still feels like a classic LEGO game, and there's many options to make it more so like them. With a deluxe edition which I got access to a ton of DLC like The Mandalorian, which I'll most likely make another video covering, or maybe explore a series of videos on this game later. The game covers all 9 different movies, so for the price, I think it's super fair as there's so many hours of gameplay in this game to not only just 100% complete it, but to generally finish the levels if you don't want to spend time unlocking everything. I definitely recommend to pick up the game, but if you want to wait a while, I'm sure it'll be cheap just like the rest of the games.